So another exciting, very exciting session today with Emmanuel from Bubble and Astrid from Alegria. And Emmanuel, I don't know if you remember, but we've met each other quite a few times over the past years, and you came to one of the very first meetup. We were just 2-3 people in the room. You came to that one, and you came to a few other ones afterwards. And last time we were about 100, and I told you like next time we'll need again another room next time we meet, and that's the case today, right? So I'm very, very pleased to have you on stage today, Emmanuel. Thanks for being with us. And today you chose this exercise, which can be difficult. So we'll see how you do today. And you'll be the questions will be facilitated by Astrid, who's the CMO at Alegria. Have a good session.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucien.
Thank you.
As Lucien just said, this is an interactive session, so it's a Q&A. I've prepared 3 sections of questions so that things are kind of organized, but don't hesitate to raise your hand. So we're going to talk about 3 main topics. First, the Bubble story or corporate story. Then the market or your vision of the no-code market. And then the product. So if you have questions that are related to one of these themes, just raise your hand while we're talking about the theme, and we'll be happy to get more questions. I've prepared a few to start us off. So thanks Emmanuel for being here and doing this exercise, which is always interesting for people who are Bubble fans, or for those who aren't, because I think that we have a few people who maybe don't know Bubble as well as Bubble fans.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a more diverse audience than when we do Bubble meetups, of course. So first question, you went a long way bootstrapping Bubble. What made you change your mind last year and raise 100 million?
So it was not last year, it was like actually 3 years ago for a smaller round, and then last year for like the first significant one, I would say. It's easy to rewrite the story after 10 years, and I can tell you exactly, how it actually all came together. When we were doing it, it was not necessarily obvious that bootstrapping was the only way. What I can say today that it was. I didn't know that when that happened. The reason we decided, so I'll answer your questions, answering first why we didn't raise money, because it's actually the more unusual part of our story. Instead of doing a big round, especially in 2021 when there was a lot of money in the ecosystem, we realized pretty early on that the time it takes to build a product that actually delivers the value we were claiming we wanted to deliver to our users, it would take a very long time. Like, it's not something that could be done in the 2 years or something. And so the challenge when we raise money is that as soon as you raise money, and it's true for anyone thinking here about starting a VC-backed venture, you're going to have to show some progress within 18 months or 2 years to be able to raise the next round. And usually the progress you're going to have to show is going to have to be shown in numbers and charts. Just saying, oh, we made a better product, the product can do more things, may not be convincing enough for investors. And so what we felt pretty early on is that if we were to try to raise money early on, we would put ourselves in a very complicated situation for the subsequent round. Then the reason is, why did we change our strategy in 2019, and then most significantly in 2021, because at that point, I think we're now in a position where we can, because the product is in a place where we could be growing fast enough to satisfy investors for the next round. So we were able to do well enough for the first round, the second round after the first round. And now looking forward, we think the market is ready, the product is ready. So now it's just up to us to grow fast enough for the next round. But it is, you put yourself on a treadmill when you raise money, and you have to be willing to run fast enough there, otherwise it's not going to be fun.
So it's doing okay. You're on track.
So far, certainly, I can't complain.
Okay, thank you. Did you imagine when you created Bubble that you would have 2 million users 10 years later? Is it like that number that you had in mind? And if yes, what's
No, it was much more than that.
Much more.
Yeah.
That's why I was expecting that answer.
I didn't realize it would take that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think is going to take to have 10 million users then? What are the biggest challenges for Bubble today?
10 million, not too long, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe a year and 2 years or something. But yeah, the next frontier for us, I think, is 100 million.
Yeah.
And we're probably between like 5 to 7 years from there. But, I spent 10 years of my life on that. I can certainly go for another 10.
But what do you think it's going to take to do that gap from 2 to 100? just like knowledge of the product being.
I think evangelization and education, which can, I mean, so that and making the product easier to use, which is really the big focus for us. I mean, I said that this morning.
Yeah.
We're not in feature expansion mode today. We've basically been building features for 10 years to the point where you can do a ton of things, but it's not necessarily the easiest product to use yet and learn. It's like, I'm very aware of that. It's not what we try to be, by the way. We're not trying to be the easiest one, because my take is that if you're building a very easy product that you can learn in a few minutes, you can't do much with it. You know, by definition, to create a powerful tool, you need to enable people to do pretty much anything they want, and they're going to make mistakes, and that takes like a learning curve that goes beyond a few minutes. But I think there are many opportunities for us to shorten the learning curve from what we have today, and so. On our side, that's this, and from a go-to-market, marketing, communication, like really evangelizing. Like a lot of people here today, but it's only 1,000 people. You know, like if you stop someone in the street randomly and ask them about Nocode, they won't know what it is. And so the next frontier for us is to make sure that that does not happen, and people know what it is as they know what code is today. Yeah. Like if you stop someone on the street today and ask them about code, maybe they're not coders, but they know what it's for. They know who uses it. And so we need to achieve the same thing with Nocode.
Maybe we can do a short poll. How many of you have already heard of Bubble before coming here? Or haven't? Maybe that would be a better question. Okay, and how many have used Bubble before? Yeah, like maybe half of the people here. Okay.
So we have some room to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good link to my next question. Like when you're a Bubble user, the community is like the help of the community is amazing. You can have answers to almost every problem. Was that something that you planned, that you would have such a strong community? And if yes, how did you make that happen? Because it's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it started a little bit out of necessity. So one of the consequences of us not raising money is that we were not able to hire anyone for a very long time. So for the first 5 years, that's a very unusual thing, and I honestly don't recommend people do that when they start a company. But for the first 2 years, it was just me and my co-founder, Josh, doing everything ourselves. Like we had no third employee or first employee. And so I was solely responsible for all of customer support. So if some people have been in this audience have been using Bubble like 5 years ago, they got many emails from me when they had problems. And it got to the point where I couldn't do that anymore myself. I was getting more than 100 emails a day, and I was, in addition, working on the product. And so the forum was for me a way to create like a scalable way for support. Yeah. So it was not necessarily to try to start a community per se, but it was trying to create something where people would help each other so that I didn't have to do it and I could focus on the product. And so we started with like a discourse forum, which we still have today. It was a bit rough at first, because at first when people were getting responses from me, they didn't want to pose their questions on the forum. So I had to be a little bit curt, which I can be sometimes, saying, look, I'm not going to respond your email, but if you copy paste the question on the forum, I will respond there. And I mean, some people didn't like it, but yeah, the trick though, if you do that, is that you need to be extremely fast at responding, because if you respond to someone, say, hey, I'll respond you there, but then it takes 2 days for them to get a response, they're going to be very pissed. So you kind of have to be obsessed on the forum, like give responses as fast as you can. I did it only me responding to questions, maybe, for 2 months. And after 3 months, I started seeing people. So first of all, people could read responses, because the whole point of a forum is that it's searchable. That's why we don't really use Discord, for instance. I think it's great for people to talk, but it doesn't necessarily create like a searchable knowledge base, what a forum does. And then so people started reading things, and after 3 months, I started noticing people responding or pointing to a response that I had written like a few weeks prior to that point.
That seems short, 2 or 3 months to get that going.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember I started the forum in June 2015, and I think we started seeing like interactions between people in September, so maybe 4 months. And then after that, it's kind of goes on its own. Obviously, we need to maintain it, so we need to keep an eye on things. We're actually starting right now to get a little bit more involved again, because I think there is an opportunity for our team to be more involved and help people for more advanced questions, But today, it's basically some things that is running on its own, and it's great. And then from there, the offline aspect of the community was actually not something we necessarily planned. When it was happening, I mean, I'm from here, so when it was happening in Paris, and Paris was early, I was showing up because that's fun, I think the first event I actually saw him here was in 2013 or 14. So even before like people think this whole thing started in Paris, and it was fun to go. But it's not something we actually actively pushed. We're only starting to look at offline activities now, because now we have a bigger team.
Okay, great. We're going to go on to questions about your vision about the no-code market and how Bubble is in the no-code market. Do you have any questions in the audience, maybe about this first type of subject about Bubble's development and history?
There is one, yeah.
I can't see at all. So.
Not the way. The other way.
Hi, Emmanuel. I'm Matt from ThinkSo, which is a Bubble agency, so I'm just saying that for the context of my question. I was just wondering, how did you, I would say, took into account the professionalization of no-code? Because I'm not really sure it was really the idea at the beginning, at least in your mission when you start the product. And how do you cope with that today regarding your roadmap, regarding, I would say also your user database in general, because I got the impression you have the two spectrum now between new users that want to build their own app, and on the other spectrum, I would say professional or agency that really build Bubble app as a business.
Yeah, great question. It's a complicated topic actually, because there's no right or wrong answer here. So to paraphrase the question, the point is that when we started the company, and still today, our mission statement is very clear. Like, we're hoping that everyone can start building the products they need for their professional or personal life. And so the idea is to turn like as many people as possible into developers. And at the same time, we're starting seeing, and a lot of you here are part of this new kind of agencies that builds product on top of the platform. And so we have basically two kinds of users: the users building for themselves, and then users building for other people. And so how do we balance the potentially different different needs that these different people are? I mean, the short answer is that it's not easy. It's a judgment call every time. I think it's possible to do both. I think a lot of products have proven it's possible to do both in history. So we certainly, like, you look at Microsoft. I always go back to Office. I think Microsoft Office is one of the most successful examples of a software franchise that truly changed how people work, both at home, professionally, and with an ecosystem of people doing things for other people. And I think we have an opportunity to do there. What I will say that I will always keep very close to my heart, like the new person that comes to the platform to build something for themselves, because that's truly the mission of the company. And I don't want to move away from that. Naturally, we still pull, to help people that are building for other people, because a lot of people are reaching out to us asking for help and say, hey, I need someone to help me build my app on Bubble. So our incentives are pretty well aligned. I just want to say what I don't want us to become is just a product that agencies use to build for other people, because it defeats the purpose of the mission.
That brings me to another question, actually. We saw that you made a partnership with Microsoft recently. Is there something to expect from that? Something bigger coming? Or?
No, I saw a lot of things about this on social media. I can tell you that has never come up. It's not coming up, not on the roadmap.
Just asking, since you talked about Microsoft. Okay, maybe we're going to move on to the second subject. And if there's other questions on this first one, we'll take them at the end, which is your vision of the no-code market. And my first question would be, who do you think is your biggest competitor in the no-code space?
It's tricky because each product is pretty different, and they tend to serve different needs for different time of the lifetime of an application. Our positioning, we want to be the platform that is the most powerful and the most open-ended, so that people don't migrate off Bubble. Which and I don't think some of the players would be offended with that when I say that. I think in fact I know, because I've been on some panels with some companies that are pretty big that everybody knows, where it was kind of expected that at some point people would migrate off their platform, and we don't want to do that, so we don't really compete there. We tend to serve different things. Truly, when we see people leaving Bubble after having built something successfully, it's code. Yeah. So the true competition we're seeing is traditional developers and code, and that's why we always trying to work toward like, being more reliable, being able to accommodate more things that our bigger apps need, because we want to push the limit of, when people migrate to code, because eventually I hope that they never do migrate to code. And the last thing I would say is, when you're in a market that is in such expansion and so small today compared to how big it could be, the last thing you want to do is to fight with your competitors, because it's a very stupid thing to do.
It was really out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, like a ton of our users would use Webflow for something and Bubble for another thing. Like, to your question, like, I don't want to sound like I'm bullshitting. Like, most people would say our competitor is Webflow because of scale, how early we started. I personally don't think so. I think it's might be true if you look from far away, but it's really when you don't know much about the no-code space. And the truth is, we have a ton of users who use both tools, and that works very well.
No, the question, because I think many people don't know who would be close to Bubble. Okay. You seem to have an actual sales team today. Does that mean that you're maybe going up market or eyeing the enterprise segment? You talked about the fact that you had your what was your mission, but is there something going on that space?
Yeah, so we started building out a sales team today. It's about 5 people today. It's actually more account management than sales. Like the pattern we're seeing, we're still very much on this product-led growth motion. So the pattern we're seeing the most frequently with our sales team is someone has been using Bubble on their own, building something on their own, and at some point they start reaching a scale where they need either bigger configuration or they have particular technical needs or support needs, and then they talk to account management team, and that's what the team works on. So it's moving up market. It's not moving up market. It's moving up accounts. Like accounts are getting bigger, but our biggest customer today, for instance, is a 10-person startup and they're using us very intensively, more than trying to get into the enterprise world. We'll get there at some point, not too soon.
Okay.
Actually, just to add on that, why not right now? Why we don't want to go full speed on the enterprise world. It's difficult to do both. Like when you build a business that is expecting most people to not pay individuals, it's a very different business, and the unit economics of this business are going to be very different than in a business where you're selling to like a Fortune 100 company, where it's going to be at least a few $100,000 or millions of dollars a year. Like the level of service you can offer them is much more personalized than what we can do. And then you have to choose there. And then you go back to the mission of the company, and the mission of the company is to become a programming standard, like the new programming standard. To do that, at some point, the most important KPI for us is the number of people who have the Bubble skill set, not the number of people, not the money we're making from like large accounts. So if I can choose between, one company that pays us $10,000 or 10,000 people that pays us, I guess 1,000, and then 1,000 people who pays $10, I definitely would go for the 1,000 people.
Okay, very clear. Do you have any questions in the audience, maybe about this subject?
One moment.
Hello. I have a question about the companies migrating out of Bubble. Like you mentioned that it's mostly due to code, but is there a more specific problem that Bubble doesn't manage to solve yet that is causing scale-ups or big companies, or once they become big, to migrate out of Bubble?
Yeah, so first of all, it does not happen as much as you'd think, because whenever someone is hitting like some scaling limit, we try to improve the platform for them, which then benefits everybody else. When it happens, it's usually because they're growing a little bit faster than we are, and so it's a great problem to have. In some ways, all these users are like great success stories, but it's really sad to see them leave, and it's sad for them because they have to rebuild everything. So, but it's because of scalability usually. Like it's just someone many years ago cloned Twitter on the platform, but then suddenly not going to make the claim that you could run Twitter today as big as it is on Bubble. And so our goal is to get there and just to keep iterating. The other reason why we sometimes lose people, and something we're also working on, is compliance. When you start touching, medical data, for instance, or like sensitive information, at the beginning when you build your very early years of your product, it's probably fine. I mean, it's not fine, but people do it, not to necessarily, they are a little bit under the radar. But if you start getting bigger and you're dealing in a regulated space, then today it's something we just don't offer. We're working on this. We're starting with the first steps that in the US are important with what they call SOC 2 compliance and this kind of other certifications. That is a way for people to comply with the law, because at some point it's a legal problem, but it's not something that we have done yet, and so we lose people over this.
Hey.
Okay, there's a lot of questions.
Hey, Emmanuel. My name is Pavel. I'm from the EasyCode. We own about 55 templates for the bubble. My main question is, what is the future of the marketplace in the bubble?
The future of the marketplace.
I mean, we definitely, it's here to stay and it's here to get better. So for context, I'm not sure everybody's aware about what we mean by the marketplace. It's mostly two things today. One is a template marketplace. The other thing is a plugin marketplace, and plugins and templates are very different. Templates is a way to start not from a white page, and then a plugin is a way to extend the functionality of your application beyond our core library, whether it's an element on a page or an action or a data source. I mean, it's so it's definitely there. What's the future is looking at for us there is probably more curation. And in the early years, we created something where not too many people were involved because it was pretty small. And as the last couple of years have been pretty intense in terms of growth, we're starting to see a lot of things happening in this marketplace. And so I think at some point we're going to have to start, being a little bit more proactive about the marketplace to make sure people get the best quality. We're putting together an ecosystem team next year whose job will be to take this over. In terms of the fundamental spirit, though, we're hoping to keep what we currently have, which is making it as easy as possible to contribute to it with as little friction, so that people can actually get compensated for their work, so sell what they're producing. And on the other side, for the end user who's acquiring these things on the marketplace, they can do that without friction as well.
Maybe we'll take one or two more questions on this subject. Yeah, but there's some.
Hello.
Then down. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Emmanuel. I have another question about compliance, because you talked about very specific fields for compliance. But what about a more generic one, which is RGPD for us all in Europe? And do you have plans to allow us to be fully compliant in a, let's say, short, middle term, or I don't know? Yeah.
Maybe I'll add to that. I had also a question about having European servers and maybe having a cluster of for Europe. So that was part of the questions that I think a lot of people are interested in.
It's on the roadmap. It's actually in the works. We're doing currently the underlying work to enable having multi-clusters. A multi-cluster company. It's pretty complicated from a technical standpoint, because then the question is where do requests go and everything. And we're a small team. We're 100 people today, but 12 months ago I think we were less than 50 people. We're more than double, but it takes some time, to onboard everyone, especially this type of engineering that is pretty complicated. But it's definitely on the roadmap. It's hard for me to give a timeline here. We definitely want to do that. I mean, how can I convince people? I'm French, so I care about Europe. I know what European people, their constraints in terms of our GDPR and other things like that. I do want to find a solution. It's not something we can quickly hack.
I didn't know that you can quickly hack it.
No,
so I think maybe most people are like, why don't you do it? But if it sounds more complicated than it is.
Generally, when you start getting to a certain scale, you start people having complaints about, why do they do this? Why do they do that? This is not the right thing. And we might be missing things, and it's always important to get feedback. The one thing I would say, and I mean, it's going to sound cheesy, but our interests here are extremely aligned with our users. If our users don't do well on the platform, the bubble will not do well. And so whenever we make decisions, we try to put the interest of the user all the time. Now, when you touch monetization problems, it can seem like counterintuitive, but we're trying to find ways, so that all incentives are aligned, so that we grow together in this. And having a European cluster is definitely a way to get there. We want to do this. It's just complicated.
Okay, thank you. Maybe in the middle. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Matt from Rapid Dev. We're a Bubble agency, And there's always new platforms coming out all the time in the no-code space. It feels like every week something's coming up. And they're very niche at first, but then you start to see the incumbent players expand their feature sets horizontally to cover more areas. So you have all these new niche players coming in. Then you have these incumbent players that are becoming more horizontal with their feature sets. I know you guys are focused on making the platform more simple, but you are also rolling out new features. When you think about future features you're going to have on Bubble, do you think more of that horizontal play, expanding into new areas, or do you focus more on going deep at what you're good at already?
I kind of want to avoid the question because really we're not in feature expansion mode right now. So it's not really the question we're asking ourselves. In general, I prefer getting better at what we currently do because I don't think what we have is perfect. And so, and it's usually a lower investment, to perfect something where you already know that people are using it. It's not perfect and people have feedback and you improve it. So, backend workflows could be working better when you run them in bulk. Well, that's something we definitely want to work on. When it's about getting to other lateral moves, I would say, the main one that comes to mind is mobile. And we'll get there. It's actually something we're starting to talk about a little bit more these days. But here again, it's not a quick hack. It's not something the worst thing we could do is to release something next week, just saying, okay, use that wrapper and that's great. We don't want to do that. If we release something for mobile, we want to actually make it a great experience. And to do that, it's going to take some work. This is not something that will happen. It's not a matter of weeks, but hopefully, something that will come in the not too distant future.
Maybe if there's an additional question on the market part, and then we'll go on to the product part, even if we just started talking about it.
Hi, Emmanuel. So as you pointed out, the challenge for no-code players in general is clearly adoption. And at the same time, your main competitor, I would say, is code, right? What's your view on the ability to export code more as an incentive to drive players into no-code in the first place because they'll know they'll have the ability to migrate once they scale? What's your view on that?
My view is that if it were easy for us to do, we would explore. The truth is it's not. So today, Bubble is not a compiler, for instance. It's an interpreter. So I don't have code to give you. Okay. We don't generate code. It does not come up as much as you'd think because about 90% of our users don't read code. And so for them, as long as the platform is reliable, that's fine. I know that at some point there will be some pressure, especially for more technical people. And as we get into bigger organizations, then we'll see what the options are here, if that's something we want to tackle. However, the bigger we get, the better our reputation, the less of a problem it is. If Microsoft releases a product like that, people are not going to ask them for their code, right? Because, well, it's Microsoft. So let's get to that size, and then that problem goes away.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? They're over there. Thanks.
Hi, Emmanuel. My name is Shafi, avid Bubble user. And I was triggered by what you described earlier, that there's now about 2 million users, and that users are staying longer or moving less quickly away to code. How large would you would you estimate the ecosystem is of companies fully running on Bubble as their, let's say, software application?
You mean how large is the ecosystem of company running on Bubble?
Yeah, like how many companies
that only work on Bubble, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know actually. I mean, I can't make the claim they just use us.
Don't tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it would be challenging. Companies that use us for most, if not all, of their IT, based on the number we have, I would say that is in the tens of thousands. But this is like a ballpark. It's a little bit challenging for us to give that information, especially so that's when I guess of the disadvantages of being on the long tail as we are. So having a ton of people is that it's not as easy to gather information as your customers if you have 50 big clients, because then you take them out to dinner and you know a lot of things about them. We can't take tens of thousands of people out to dinner, and so we're working to ways to try to gather more information, from available information on the web. I mean, our team is working on this, so I'm hoping to get to a better understanding there. that being said, it does not necessarily impact how well we can serve these users. So this is mostly interesting for us in terms of assessing the scale of the Bubble universe because we want it to grow.
Maybe if you look at which plans are the most used, you can have an idea, I guess. Of but like in the 2 million users since you got there this year, what do you imagine are the part of not just people who come and check and leave or.
I mean, it's tough to
people
say
that are
that
on
quickly.
plans, like paid plans, maybe.
Yeah, we don't really communicate about this. So
I tried.
I can see you trying to trick me here, and I won't fall for it.
Sorry. Okay, we're going to move on to questions maybe about the product. I think maybe there's many questions about the product. Actually, all my questions were about mobile, so I guess you said that it was on the roadmap. Yeah, do you want to talk about
not necessarily it's on the
roadmap?
It's definitely something we're looking into right now.
Oh, it's not on the roadmap.
I mean, the deciding where it goes in the roadmap is part of the investigation, the result of the investigation work we're doing.
Okay. If there's some questions, we can take them, but I can't really see. Otherwise,
So maybe Emmanuel, what's on the roadmap if mobile is
yeah,
not?
that was the general question about the.
I mean, it's going to be the third time I repeat the same thing, so it's going to be pretty boring. But yeah, reliability, performance, and making the product easier to learn and use today is the biggest thing. And given that the product is a 10-year-old product where we kept adding features and features and features, I think there is a lot of potential there, and a lot of work.
And maybe for people who are less familiar with Bubble, what if you had to say like one use case that's really perfect for Bubble, or a use case where it's difficult to do it outside of Bubble in the no-code world, what would it be?
I mean, basically any web application that another tool is not like going to be doing exactly what you want without modification. So, in software there is the people. So it's more of an enterprise concept, but it's actually true for any kind of organization, including individuals, which is buy or build, right? Do you buy an off-the-shelf solution or do you build it yourself? What Bubble is for the build part. So if you're building, for instance, an e-commerce store and you basically want to sell something online, and after spending a few minutes on Shopify, it seems like it's going to do exactly what you want to do, just use Shopify. Like it's going to be easier, less pain for everyone. Yeah. The thing, if you start feeling that Shopify is not going to let you do exactly what you want to do because you want to enable people to upload maybe a logo they want to put on their T-shirt, well, then you don't have any other option than Bubble, actually. Like the alternative would be to write code. Yeah. And so that's the use case we're going for here.
Specific functionalities that are not on Shelf.
Like, yeah, we have, when people need to customize, like we think there is tremendous value customizing the software that you use either internally or externally for your business, and that's where that's our market.
Okay, I think there was a question over there. 2 questions. Okay.
Hello, Emmanuel. I'm Hugo, founder of Luna Park, a visual scripting platform. So you kept telling us what was on the roadmap, and I want to ask you what is not yet on your roadmap. What will Bubble look like in like 10 years, 20 years? Feel free to imagine anything. You won't be accountable for what you say.
I should be spending more time about what the product will look like in 10 years. It's a bit... the thing with technology that people tend to, I think, overestimate the progress in 2 years, but then underestimate the progress in 10 years. And so I think a lot of it will depend on, what the situation in terms of human-machine interface, what it will look like in 10 years. And I think we'll be very well positioned to take advantage of that, but I'm kind of curious to see where the technology lands. What I'm hoping to be in 10 years is the platform that is the first idea that comes to mind when someone needs to build something, regardless of the platform they want to build on, whether it's web, mobile, Apple Watch, whatever. And then where I think there is a lot of potential is to start, being more understanding for errors when people make mistakes. Like Bubble, it's probably one of the things that makes us different from a lot of other platforms, that you can definitely have bugs in Bubble, like Bubble bugs, if you don't put your workflows together the right way. And I think there is a lot of things we could be doing as we gather more information of the common mistakes that people are making, where we could start, not necessarily auto-fixing, that might be dangerous, but at least, suggest fixes better and stuff like that. So try to get even closer to the way the person thinks and speaks, and so that's why I'm hoping to invest time. It's not something that we're ready for right now. I don't think this is the biggest need that we're hearing from our community. So there is some time here, but definitely something we want to invest in the future.
Thank you.
We have one here.
Maybe to stay a little bit on today and recently, the release of the responsive engine was a big success, since now it's the default for new apps. Can you give us a bit of insight on how it was adopted by the community and how much of an effort it was for the team to get that out? Because it was...
Well, the fact that now it's released to every new application means that adoption is actually skyrocketing, because by definition there are more applications created today than there were like a year ago, and all of them on the new system. We've seen quite a few teams actually, or individuals, migrating their apps, and they should, honestly. It's just better, in particular for performance, which is not necessarily what people would think about, but just behind the scene, the way it's built works much better. It's much more fluid, and it's going to make the pages load and display things much faster. In terms of how big the investment was, it was a very large investment. Often, like a couple of years ago, I would say, well, it's easy. Why don't they just do what Webflow does? The thing is that we do very different things. Like Webflow is a CMS. We do web apps, and the way, the freedom we need to offer to people when they build applications is actually a problem when you're trying to build something like the new Flexbox-based engine that we've built. And so to your question, how long did it take?
How much of an effort?
Probably more than a year and a half, I think. And we went through many iterations. Like the thing that we eventually showed to people was very different. We had 3 different prototypes that we put in the hands of some people to see what would work well. There were a lot of trade-offs between how much flexibility you give, how much control you give, how much we try to do things automatically. And so we had to find the sweet spot. I'm very proud of what the team has achieved. This is actually one of the first projects where Josh and I were actually not too involved. I mean, we were involved at the validation steps, but most of the ideas came from the team, which was awesome to see. Because it's one of the biggest evolutions we've had as a product, and it was great to see the team come up with something that is 100 times better than the previous iteration of it.
And so I understand that now, of course, for new apps, it's there, so the adoption is strong. But from the people who used to use Bubble, the freedom that you had to do just whatever you want, but that wasn't always great in the end. That there's a good adoption for them too. They were happy about it in the community.
Yeah, especially because we're still able to expose some ways to give a lot of the freedom. So and at some point, I mean, again, I would recommend people to go, because this is what we're going to maintain going forward. All the improvements are going to come on the new version, and so it's important to be on the latest version.
Okay. There were questions there? Okay.
Thank you. We talked a lot about building when you have this idea and you can do whatever you want with Bubble. But an interesting part of the creation process is also the ideation and actually getting to know what you want to build. And so I'm wondering, how do people actually ideate before deciding, do they buy or do they build on Bubble? And how can you accelerate this step of building the idea and then getting to do it on Bubble?
Yeah, it's actually one of our challenges. Often when we poll people and say, why did you didn't stay on the platform? People are like, I don't know what to build. And which is very fair reason not to be using Bubble, but we feel like there is actually an opportunity here to accompany these people better. So to your question, how do they do this? I'm not necessarily the best person to know that, actually. People who teach design or product thinking will be more qualified than I am. I've seen everything. Some people go straight away and start building. I don't necessarily recommend it. Some people start on a pen or on a Figma file or a Balsamiq back in the day. It's probably a better approach. Everyone has a little bit of a different approach here. We want to find ways to get even earlier in the thinking process when someone is thinking about something to build. That's why we try to partner with schools, for instance, trying to get with the locations where people are thinking about their next idea to make sure that we're part of the process, because we know that the Bubble learning process will go better if they actually have a better build idea, a fully fledged idea of what they want to build. We have a program we started in the US our immerse programs, like for diverse founders. That's one of the idea of the program, is that we actually don't put people on Bubble right away. We make sure and work with them on their ideas first. Now, this is a program that takes, maybe 20, 25 people per quarter. It would be challenging to that at scale. So I would love to find ways to do that more scalable. Currently, my bet is on partnerships with schools. There might be some software ways to do that, but I think it's a problem that a lot of people have tried to solve and no one has really solved in a software way. So sometimes you might just, be humble and be like, okay, software can do everything here.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the product or the?
I have a question on Peltarios. I read a few days ago. Again, will stop on artificial intelligence. Is there something that will replace Peltarion, another partnership or something?
Which company?
Peltarion is one of the plugins you have that is stopped now and is helping.
Yeah, I mean, there are other. I'm not an expert in AI and machine learning as an API. There must be replacements probably. It's not something we offer ourselves, right? It's the same thing as if you were using code and you use a service that suddenly shuts down. This is an unfortunate situation for our users. It's an unfortunate situation for all their users that are using them, not necessarily using Bubble. Like Bubble is only one way to use this product. Like you could be using it with code. As soon as you start building a product that's complicated enough, that relies on a lot of different services, you expose yourself to situations like this. Fortunately, it does not happen too often. The market dynamics should bring some replacement. I don't know how much time it would take.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. There's someone up there.
Hello. So you may have seen already some videos where people kind of write exactly what app they want, and then these AI tools actually start making this app for these people. So are there any ways maybe in a few years you're thinking of kind of how the Bubble editor will interact with these kind of AI tools to build basic forms or even more complex apps?
Yeah, eventually, we'd love to find a way to kind of open our editor a little bit more to other tools, but we're not ready to that yet. So yes, it's definitely quite a few years away. I've been watching how people have been leveraging AI and machine learning to either go for natural language to an application or from drawings into an application. I think there is a lot of potential here. It's not the next thing for us, but when that technology will mature, we'll find ways to integrate within our platform. Whether we do that ourselves or whether we open it so that we can leverage other people will depend on where the technology is at this point.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, there's one right here too.
One here. I guess it was in last March. There was an attempt to change the pricing. So where are you now?
If it were to do it again, I would have done it differently. The pricing remains a topic for us. And, there was an attempt that was not successful. I think looking back, there are a few things we could have done better. But the underlying problem, which is our current pricing, is not setting up us for success in the very long term. It remains the thing. What we announced last year in March is that we would come back with a better metric because fundamentally the problem we're having is not a number problem. It's not a dollar amount problem. It's a metric problem, and we're working on this. I won't give a timeline about when this is going to come out, but this is something that we're working on. Like the project didn't get canceled silently. On that topic, the one thing I want to say that. To my point that our interests are aligned. The last thing we want when we think about pricing is to put our users in a situation where they can't survive financially and then they die. So we will never do that. And if we were to find one day something is actually going out of business because of our pricing, we'll definitely change it because, believe it or not, our interests are extremely aligned here. But it's also important for everyone that we find a pricing that enables our platform to keep growing because everybody that builds on the platform depends on the success of the platform. And we live in a world where, economics matter. We live in, in an industry where growth from a financial perspective matters, and we need to make sure that our pricing sets us up. So when we do announce something, I hope people will remember that, because it's not just, oh, they're being greedy. No, I mean, it doesn't work that way. We're trying to find something that will make sure that, 10 years from now, Bubble still exists and is the biggest platform in the world to build software. And so everything that we're trying to do here has that goal in mind. And really, if we find ourselves in a place that makes Bubble not usable by some people that have a very legitimate use case, but just, the way we're designing some pricing decisions, drive them out of the platform, that's something we'll act extremely quickly on.
Okay, we have one last question because we don't have time after that.
Yeah, hello, thank you. Hi, Emmanuel. I wanted to ask, from your personal experience, what makes a good Bubble developer? Like, what kind of skill sets or skills? And will that change in the future?
It's a great question, great last question, actually. Well, first of all, it's going to sound obvious, but the willingness to learn and not rushing into getting something. Like sometimes people have the idea that, oh, Nocode is going to be fast and easy, so let's go straight in building without necessarily trying to learn the basics. In my experience, I've seen people invest 10, 15 hours before actually trying to build their product, and it always leads to better results. So that's the first thing I would say. And then from a hard skill standpoint, it's the challenge with Bubble is that you need to have kind of both sides of the brain. You need kind of the design side, not necessarily to make the prettiest application, actually, because beautifying something you have on the page is actually fairly easy to outsource once you have something that works, and you can have a designer that comes and helps you there. But having something that is functional and has a good user experience so that user can interact with it regardless of how pretty the font is. So you need to have that side. And then the other side is more on the workflow side, where, you need to be a little bit organized. Things I think that work well is, actually write down, your different data types, write down, the logic of the different workflows. The more you keep building your applications, the more complicated it gets. A little bit like code, actually. Like the best coders actually have usually a notebook, whether it's digital or I've even seen like physical notebooks where they write down things they do so that they can go back and modify things faster. And it's the same thing for Bubble and Nocode in general, but Bubble in particular. So being like a little bit particular about, taking notes and writing down about the different things you're doing. Not get frustrated with mistakes. It's like if you're a software engineer, like every software engineer has spent a night on trying to find a very stupid bug, and then after 6 hours they're like, oh, that was that, and then they hate themselves for a few hours and then they move on. It's going to be the same thing sometime, when you build applications. So you need to keep that spirit. It's part of the software building experience. I think it's more fun to do that on Bubble, and usually goes faster to find bugs because it's a higher level of abstraction, but it's still the same thing. And keep moving forward and don't lose hope. So the last thing I would say, and it's something we see even internally actually at Bubble. So when people start at the company, we want to make sure they know the product well. So part of the onboarding experience is to spend some time learning the product, and people don't ask for help soon enough. So internally at the companies, they try to build things, but they don't go on our different communication system to ask for help for people from other people. And it's the same thing for people in our community. We want to make people, when they start struggling, should go on the forum and ask, because there are a lot of people that are willing to help there.
Thank you.
Thank you, because it was really interesting. My question was, I'm sorry, my question was because the subject was really interesting, but about learning. Do you think like there will be maybe one day where there will not be like engineer, but more people that learn directly like from the no-code, and will be like a graduation way of, or graduation pass for the no-code,
So question about certification and, certifications.
Definitely. Certification is something different, because certification is coming from a company certifying people. But having educational program teaching people the fundamentals of no-code and Bubble in particular, it's already happening. Obviously, it's only the beginning. There can be many, many more places that can do that. But it's definitely something that will happen over time, because there is need for education there. That's one of the reasons why people are here today. And then, that hopefully, no-code and Bubble become kind of a path toward engineering for some people. Like, I think what is not a good outcome today is when we tell people they need to code to do everything. So that's very much something I'm against, because I don't think that's true. So hopefully people start with no-code technologies, and if at some point they start finding themselves in a place where no-code is not the right tool, then they get into more traditional coding technologies.
Thanks, Emmanuel. I think we have to stop here. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. How long will you be on here today, so people can come and ask you questions in person? I mean, are you going to stay the whole day?
I'm not sure yet. Probably a couple of hours.
Okay. Well, you can
and
try
then hopefully come to the party tonight. I'll see.
Okay, great. So you know when Emmanuel is here to answer other questions. Thank you very much.